Start recording. So this is a day in the life of a goat grazer. I do a lot of question and answer about goat grazing and goats on the go and what it's like to work in this odd version of farming. And a lot of the questions come around to what's it like? What are you doing day to day? How does this fit in with the rest of the farm, the rest of anything else you're doing? And so this webinar was meant to kind of answer some of those questions, as well as talk about goat grazing in general, and certainly a little bit of how Goats on the Go operates within the realm of targeted grazing. My name is Margaret. I am an employee of Goats on the Go. I am the affiliate network support person. So if you have questions about being an affiliate, you're probably going to get referred to me. I do Q&A calls one-on-one with folks, and there'll be a link for that at the end. And once folks are in the affiliate network, I'm responsible for kind of just keeping the network running and humming and engaging. So that includes occasional Zoom calls, just no real agenda, just us all checking in and chatting, troubleshooting issues for individuals as they come up. You know, hey, I'm having a problem with this type of vegetation or my goat's behavior, or am I wording this wrong to customers because I keep having this frustrating conversation. So pretty much anything and everything related to goats or grazing or the business side, I either will help or try and find someone else who can help if I'm truly not able to. That's my email address and my phone number. Again, the best way to get a hold of me is either by email or by setting up a Q&A call. But I am relatively responsive by text as well. What is Goats on the Go? We are a network of independent goat grazing businesses and sheep grazing businesses across the entire country and beyond the US borders. We've got one affiliate up in Canada now. We've had some others in Canada previously, in Tasmania even. We are centered in the Midwest because Goats on the Go started in central Iowa in 2012. We are now on our 9th year of the affiliate network. So we have grown to, let's see, a few days ago, it was 65 affiliates. I think we're up to 67 now with a couple of new additions who have popped in recently. And as an affiliate, we in Goats on the Go are all united by a common core methodology. Here's the basics of how we operate, the strategies we employ, the way we work with customers, the way we treat our goats, and the brand identity of Goats on the Go. But we are all still independent business and farm owners and managers. So everyone, again, just because of geography, might have different target vegetation they're dealing with. Because of personal preference or capacity, one person might have 20 goats, one person might have 200 goats. The season you're working in is varied by individual affiliate. Goats on the Go itself doesn't set rules or regulations for that sort of thing. So we have a huge amount of diversity among our members, but there's still enough of similarity between how we operate that we all get along very well, and we can bounce ideas off one another and benefit from having this network. That said, especially for the purpose of today's presentation, if you were to average out all affiliates or put us all in a hat and pull one person out, I'll describe kind of what the everyday procedures and practices look like for this average affiliate. Most of us are running somewhere in the realm of 3 to 5 dozen goats as a grazing herd unit. We might have multiple herds, but most of those herds themselves are about 3 to 5 dozen goats. Again, this varies across the country, but a lot of us, especially since we're heavily Midwestern based, we're grazing for 5 to 7 months out of the year, when things are green and growing. And most of the projects we do are in the 1 to 10 acre range. Again, these are not hard rules. There's no reason or no rule that says we can't do smaller or larger projects. This is just, throw a dart at the affiliate map, and this is probably what you're going to find. And many of us are also balancing other farm enterprises or jobs on top of doing this crazy targeted grazing thing. So what is this like? I don't know if everyone else is a meme lover. I love memes, and so I made this one about being a targeted grazing professional. If you start getting into this work, your friends are going to assume that you're just cuddling goats all day. You do some of that. Your spouse, especially if they're not a farmer, thinks you're just buying livestock all day, and that's very, very true, especially early on. Regulators and the government tend to think you're just letting goats run loose through neighborhoods, running amok, and that does happen, but not deliberately. Our clients think that we're just, like Heidi up in the mountains leading these goats, and it's wonderful sunshine, fresh air, things like that, when the reality is often far different. The goats just think we're there to provide them with good food. But in reality, we actually spend a lot of time hot, sweaty, prickers, bug bites, bee stings, and that picture on the bottom right is a roll of electric netting after it's been through some really nasty loose brush, and it took me several hours to detangle it. But what does an average day look like? All right, so this is my farm, which again is somewhat similar to kind of the affiliate average. I'm up about 6 a.m. Coffee time. I need my caffeine. Many of us need excessive amounts of caffeine for this. Checking animals at home, doing my basic morning chores. I also have a rather large hobby dairy herd of goats, and so I'm doing morning milking. I'm taking care of the bottle babies. I do have, a farm that produces more than just goats and goat grazing services, so I got to take care of everybody else. And then many affiliates, including me, on and off, we are not just grazing goats, we are also producing goats, often market goats. And so we might have a couple of herds out and about eating things. We're going to have some at home, say the mamas with newborn kids who are too young to go out grazing, so they need time and attention as well. So I'll spend a few hours every day just doing the basic stuff at home. By about 9 a.m., I'm checking on my first working herd. So, especially in I've downsized a little bit the last couple of years, but at my heyday, I was running between 3 and 5 herds of goats at any given time. So, I'd have to check a couple of different sites per day. So, by about 9 o'clock, I'm checking the first herd. Drive over. We recommend that animals are checked every single day. Again, this is a customer facing business and operation. We want to make sure that the critters are all healthy. We also need to be there to make sure that the water is full, that the animals have adequate stuff to eat. We need to make sure the fence is intact. The amount of things that can go wrong in an instant is pretty high. So everything from a deer runs through the fence and knocks it over, or a branch falls on it. It's pretty important to lay eyes on that fence right about every day to make sure that it is intact, standing upright, and that it hasn't shorted out. Check the goat's behavior. Yes, this includes, is anybody injured or anything, but this is also observing them to see if they're telling you they're getting hungry. Now, we generally fence off a portion of the project we're doing, maybe half an acre or so at a time for that herd of, 3 to 5 dozen goats. And we let them finish that half an acre or so before we rotate them to a new section. So every couple of days, they're going to start running out of food and we have to prepare more fence for them. So checking that behavior is a way of saying, all right, do we need to move today? Can we wait till tomorrow? And then using a visual estimate of how much they have left to eat. So when you first put the goats on a job, there's plenty of greenery. They're not going to go hungry. If you walked out and you saw this, you say, okay, these goats are perfectly happy. The goats aren't even paying attention to us. They're busy eating. After a few days, it's starting to look a little bit thinner. There's still green in there. You can still see that there's some weeds coming up from the ground. There's still some taller stuff they can probably reach, but they've, eaten all the ice cream off, and now we're waiting for them to clean up the rest. By the time we're ready to pull them off, though, it is pretty barren. And at this point, between what you're seeing visually with the plants and also the goat's behavior, this is when you're saying, all right, it's about time to go. All right, so I've done my first basic check. Didn't have to do any real work there, just walked around the edges of the fence, made sure it was still hot, made sure the goats were all happy. We're heading off to another site. And I mentioned a pit stop specifically because, again, especially for those of us in the Midwest, which is many of us, it gets hot early, it gets humid. Highly recommend you sign up for all those different rewards programs for a lot of your regional gas stations because you make really good use out of them, and have some drink containers that can hold a lot of liquid because we go through quite a bit. For reference, when I was running between 2, 3, 5 herds of goats, I was putting about 4,500 miles on my car every month. So it really adds up. We do a lot of windshield time. I get to my second herd site at about noon. These guys, let's say they need to move to a new paddock. They've finished the area they're in. It looked like that third picture from earlier, and it's time to get them to the next spot. All right, so we've got to build fence. We've got to set up a new paddock for them. Again, maybe that half an acre or so, depending on the site. And that might take 90 minutes, 2 hours, depending on how dense the vegetation is, the logistics of the site. Part of planning schedules out for projects, part of scouting projects, pricing projects is learning to look at an area and say, all right, this is going to be a doozy of a fence setup. I better bake that into the cost. And so that's part of what we go through during Goats on the Go training. Just how do you look at a site and look through the vegetation to see what is this going to actually be like to deal with? We mentioned goat behavior before, and so when I come to this site, the goats are going to be telling me we're hungry, we're ready to move. So setting up the new fence, move the goats into the new area, also move their water tank and refill that, move any minerals that we're providing, and move over the fence charger, of course, take down the old fence, and then before you leave, make sure you remember to plug that fence charger in or turn it on, because there's nothing worse than driving about 20 minutes away and going, oh shoot, did I hit that button or not? So we become pretty habitual about not just thinking, did I set or turn the fence on, but actually testing the voltage to make sure we've got a number in our mind. We know it's running nice and hot. So this is the behavior I'm talking about. You get there and the animals are all looking at you like, hey, waiter, we're ready for something else. They're waiting and they're even looking on the other side of the fence because they know that's where they're going to be going next. The goats love this work. I mean, yes, because they get to eat, of course. And so they become pretty accustomed to the routine. They will start to learn, you know what? Yeah, we're getting a little bit hungry now, but the waiter slave is going to come build us new fence later, and then they're going to move us to eat more stuff. So they're actually pretty patient to a degree. I tell people that we are in a very tenuous relationship of trust with these animals. They trust that we're going to move them to new vegetation before they get too hungry. We better never betray that trust, because once they feel they can't trust us to move them before they're hungry, they're going to start jumping that fence. And then it's going to be hard to ever get them trained back to trusting you again. So learning to eyeball the vegetation and learn and figure out, do I need to move them now, or do I need to move them in 6 hours or 24 hours? That is an essential skill set, and it is one of the harder ones to learn. One of the coolest parts of this job, though, is just looking at the change you get. So this is a before after, just taken over the fence line that we set up. The goats cleaned up everything that they're going to eat on the right hand side, and they've moved to the new area on the left. You'll notice there is a lot of greenery left on the right hand side. This is another tricky part of this business, and something that we're working on doing a more detailed job of in our own training. There are some plants that the goats just won't eat. And so we're working on trying to like categorize that and note down, hey, the goats are just never going to eat A, B, C, X, Y, Z, so that we know going into projects, don't promise this to your customers. So in this case, that's pawpaw. The goats do not touch pawpaw. I've never seen them do more than nibble it. When I saw all the pawpaw on this particular site, I let the landowner know, like, that's not going to be something we can help with. But they were okay with that because there's still a lot more that the goats are doing. And they were actually looking at coming through here, possibly with some like larger equipment. So simply being able to see more of the lay of the land was good enough for them. All right, so I've done that fence move, loaded all the extra fence back into my vehicle. The goats are happy and eating. Back home for whatever bit of free time, or at least flexible time, is left in the day. So my goats at home, the mamas with babies, maybe I need to build fence for them. I'm also doing computer work during this time. So we, as part of being a Goats on the Go affiliate, or really any targeted grazing professional, you get inquiries. We get inquiries daily. Right now, this is like the peak busy season, and I'm hearing of affiliates who are getting 3 to 4 emails a day, and they're so busy building fence and moving goats and hauling animals that they're having a hard time finding enough time to respond to those. But it's important to do that. So respond to new inquiries, set up site visits so that we can keep jobs coming into the pipeline, and then finalize quotes after you've been doing some site visits. This is also where I'm making a game plan for tomorrow. So I'm taking my mental notes from the first job site we went to. Okay, yeah, that site. The goats didn't need to be moved today, but do they need to be moved tomorrow? Do I need to budget more time in case we have to do a fence build? Do I need to be bringing extra equipment? Are the goats getting close to the end of one of their jobs? Do we need to start thinking about hauling them to a new site? So that all goes into the kind of free or flexible time at the end of the day. And then, of course, evening chores. For me, that's milking again, that's more bottle babies and, dealing with the miscellaneous chickens and whatever. Some things that happen not every day. It's not part of the daily life of a goat grazer, but it might be part of the weekly life or regularly scheduled occurrences. Site visits. It is very hard to get a good estimate of a project, the scope, the difficulty, the types of vegetation, without going and seeing it. So site visits are a standard part of how we're operating right now. It's just as much for our own mental security as it is for the landowner. Sometimes our landowners have no idea how many acres they're dealing with. Sometimes you get onto a site and you realize, gosh, there's just nothing the goats will eat, or there's something toxic the goats, we don't want them to eat. So estimate, maybe 30 minutes for a site visit plus whatever the drive time is. We're visiting with the landowners. We're talking about their goals and expectations, but also taking note of the goat related things like the size of the site. Is there vegetation we need to be concerned about? What's the terrain like? Where are we going to get water from? Can we fit a trailer there? How will the goats come in and out? So getting the lay of the land is very, very important. This is primarily, though, a service thing, or a service industry, even though we are feeding our animals. So one of the biggest challenges as a newer goat grazer is not trying to think about this work as free feed for our livestock. It is way too much work to be considered free feed. For the amount of time, energy, and gas money I spend doing a single project, I could have bought a nice round bale and delivered it to my goats and then taken the rest of the week off. So we do need to make sure we're valuing our time, and we are also putting the customer's needs first and foremost. Obviously, we're not going to graze a site with something that could harm our animals. We're not going to put them at risk of toxicity or nutrient deficiency, but getting the customer's expectations met is, aside from those things like toxicity and danger, that is our primary goal, not raising livestock, not maintaining our livestock. So this is one site I've done. I don't need to do a site visit here anymore. I've grazed this one multiple times, but this is a pretty low density, fairly easy setup. So that's, a very simple site visit and quote afterwards. This is much thicker density. That sumac looking stuff in there, the goats are kind of hit or miss on whether or not they eat that. So these two projects are going to be very different in terms of how I'm planning, how I'm pricing, and how I'm budgeting time and effort. I might also be scheduling these differently just based on maybe customer preferences, but also maybe based on the types of vegetation. Do we need to hit this early in the season before it goes to seed, or can we wait till later in the year when our schedules aren't as tightly packed? This is a totally different scope of project. So this is a big site. This is very steep, very difficult terrain, very dense vegetation. So now we're looking at hundreds of goats instead of dozens of goats. Again, you got to get out to the site and actually see what you're dealing with, because until I actually hiked up this hill, I did not have enough respect for this project. I'm glad I did it, but that one was a doozy. I'm taking notes while I'm out there. Sometimes it is writing on paper while we're, driving around on a four-wheeler or something like that. Sometimes it's just, taking notes down on my phone once I get back in the car. I like setting up a map that I can see and that I can send to the landowner. Say, okay, these are the different areas we talked about. Do I have this right? Do I understand where you want the animals grazed or not? And then this helps you show, okay, how big. Again, some landowners have no concept of how large or small an area is. How big is this area actually going to be? What's it going to cost to do something like this? So putting it visually is very helpful, I think, for me, and then definitely for our customers. Other events that might happen on a weekly or so basis. Time to move the goats. The goats have finished the project they're on. We've got to get them to a new project. again, since we're mostly during the warm, pleasant, or too hot times of year, start early. That gives you time to try and get the animals moved before it's too excessively hot. It also gives you time to deal with any issues that might arise. Oopses where the goats, jump the fence and don't get onto the trailer. Um, Trailer issues. So the number of flat tires I've had is substantial, especially when we're driving trailers onto, people's often rural properties. You never know what you're going to run over. So I recommend getting an early start on that when you can. So we drive to the site, we load up the goats and equipment. This is payday too. This is often when we're collecting our final paycheck from that customer. We're taking after photos. So when you go to the next site, I'm going to tell you take starting photos so that you can see the transformation that happens over time. Well, at the end of it, even though you're tired and hot and you want to just get the animals moved to the next location, take that time to snap a few pictures so you can showcase what you've done. So then, yeah, we're driving to that new site, building fence, again, taking pictures. After the animals are happily at their new project and we get back home, now that's when we're saying to the next project in line, hey, we're at, the project right before yours. I think it's going to take about 8 days to finish that. I expect to see you next Tuesday. We'll be in touch as we get a little bit closer. What I didn't note here is how long the herd transport and new project setup can take. I've had some that might be, 4 hours, depending, it just depends on how far apart the locations are. Some other ones where I got to build a lane to get the goats from the back of someone's property up to the front, and we're driving for 45 minutes. It can be sometimes a 6 to 8 hour day. So again, starting early, packing water for yourself, making sure it's, try and get it to be as cool and comfortable for the critters as possible. This is the load up. This man, year one especially, this is the most stressful time of goat grazing, trying to get those animals up onto that trailer. I mentioned earlier, they like their jobs. They like doing this. They recognize the routine. They come to expect certain things. It takes a little bit for the animals to really like getting onto a trailer. And I don't know if they ever really love the experience, but they learn to at least tolerate it over time. But getting them moved up is an art and a science. It is becoming an increasing proportion of time that we spend during parts of training is getting people over the challenge of getting the goats to load the first couple of times or the first season. So that's what a loadout looks like. We always, standard toolkit of a targeted grazer is oodles and oodles of fence, spare batteries and chargers, and probably, miles of hose, it feels like. The goats, again, I don't know that they ever love being sardines on a trailer like this, but you notice they're pretty much all facing the same direction. They learn. We get on the bus, we go somewhere else, we wait a while, and then mom opens the door and we get to go eat stuff. They will stand there silently watching the back gate, as long as they keep hearing someone shuffling around outside and working. They'll stand there and wait and be quiet because they know as soon as that door opens, it's party time. It's kind of fun to see. Various scenes from setup. Again, tools of the trade. We generally keep some sort of a mineral out for the animals while they're on projects. We expect, especially in areas where we have a very diverse vegetation offering, they should be getting everything they need and more from what they're eating. But there's some parts of the country where certain minerals are in short supply. At certain times of year when the plants are just less nutritious, we might be having problems with deficiencies. So a mineral source is good, and always have a water source. We can use like existing water sources, ponds or streams or lakes on occasion. Those are often just fine. But especially if you're doing a public facing project, having that very visible water tank is really important for just kind of public perception. And again, once the goats are let off the trailer, they oftentimes will put their heads down and start eating right away. You'll get a few who will walk the entire perimeter. They're going to see the entire, go check out the buffet menu before they start digging in. But others, as soon as they're off that trailer, they're putting their heads down and eating. And Layla, I see the question. I'll get into that a little bit at the end. Thank you for the question, though. Here's another one. Cool before, after. Again, this is just a very visually satisfying job. And again, the goats love it as well. Some of our projects are very small and oddball. This was less than a tenth of an acre on the side of a hill in a residential area. Um, the fence was projecting out into the street a little bit. I was really, really kind of not sure how this one would go. But the goats did a pretty darn good job. And you can see this is why we love goats. You see how high up on the trees they've stripped the greenery off and even started to chew the bark off of some of those poison ivy branches or vines. Um, no other animal gets at weeds and brush and vines quite as aggressively as goats. And so we really, really love them for that. And that's why they're such an important part of our herds. Many of us do run sheep. We add sheep in if we just need extra mouths. Oftentimes it's cheaper to buy sheep than goats. And so if you just need a little bit more eating power, sheep are great. Some of us are doing very grassy projects. I've started to do more prairie-based projects. And so having animals that prefer grass is a little bit advantageous. So we don't dislike our sheep. They're useful, but the goats are really where the magic happens for this sort of work. Other things that happen in goat grazing world. So this is not something that we plan on. This is not something that happens often or shouldn't happen often, but it will happen sooner or later. You get a text from the landowner. Hey, one of the goats is limping. One of the goats looks like something's wrong. Um, Most of our landowners, hopefully all of our landowners, are just as happy to have the goats out. They're excited about the process and the experience as well as the service being provided. And so they are very concerned if something looks like it's wrong with the goats. So you will probably get lots of text and information that you really don't need, but we appreciate it because we like that the landowners are paying attention. And it does help catch some problems off and on. Recommend having a basic medical kit, a room temperature safe antibiotic, something to treat hoof injuries or issues or, superficial wounds, maybe some painkillers, set of hoof trimmers, and just always have that with you in the vehicle so that next time you're out, you can say, yep, I'm coming out, later this afternoon to check on the goats. I'll take a look at them. Most commonly, what they're calling about or mentioning is limping. And at least in my neck of the woods, that is caused by one of two things. The ground's really damp for an excessive amount of time and they get some sore or, mild like infection or abrasion between their toes, or they've stepped on something thorny. And so, address it as quickly as possible. Make sure the animal is healthy enough to stay back out there, and then let that landowner know. In this case, the photos here in this post I made about one, this was a public park, and a couple of people flagged that a few goats were limping. And what had happened was we'd been on a site with a lot of thorny locust trees recently. And if you do not have thorny locusts near you, you're very lucky. Not only do they have nasty, sharp thorns, they actually are toxic. They're slightly poisonous. And so they cause a really nasty, minor infection. It's very painful, lots of pus, but it's easy to clean out and fix pretty quickly. So in this case, it was a matter of catching the limping animal, doing a quick hoof trim, spraying him with some wound spray, and he was good to go. It was mild enough I didn't think I needed to remove that animal, but you may have cases where the goat will be fine, but if it looks bad, we need to maintain a good positive public image. So there might be cases where you have to pull him instead. So again, in this case, I said, yep, we know a couple of these guys might be a bit tender-footed for a while, but they've been treated, we'll monitor them, and we don't think it's worth pulling them away from their buddies and from all the food they've got right now. Another infrequent, but it will happen. It's 8 p.m. or maybe 10 p.m. You're winding down for the day. You've put your lounge pants on, and you get the call that the goats are out. I have had this at, again, 8 p.m., 10 p.m., 2 a.m., 5 a.m. It will happen. It is not even necessarily a matter of, did you do something wrong? We talk about having your fence high and tight and hot. But like I mentioned earlier, a deer can run through the fence, a branch can fall on the fence. So sooner or later, even if your goats weren't being malicious or ornery at all, they will get out. So we have to be responsive. We are on call 24/7. We always have to be able to go respond to these sorts of issues. And it is an interesting exercise to learn how to effectively convey both, yes, I'm very concerned about this and I will address it right away without sounding panicked. So you need to reassure your customer that it will be just fine, but also that you're taking it very seriously. Usually, we are the ones most stressed out by this because it is an awful feeling to be 30 minutes away, 45 minutes away, and think, oh gosh, these animals, what are they doing now? Are they getting near the road? Um, Again, it's usually more stressful on us than anybody else. Most of the time, we get there, and the critters are perfectly happy to go back where we want them. They happened to get out because, again, something else messed with the fence. But it is worth being responsive to. And if it starts to become a theme, then we need to look a little bit harder. Is there an animal causing problems? I had a herd disappear for 10 days once because there was one critter who learned to put her nose under the bottom of the fence where it's not hot and pop the whole thing up and lead everybody on an escapade into hundreds of acres of unmanaged parkland. So they didn't cause any problems. It was just highly stressful for me. But we managed to figure out who the culprit was and sent her off to find other employment in somebody's freezer. But most often, this is, again, a hugely visually and I'll say even like kind of emotionally satisfying job. This is fun to be able to be in some of these really cool landscapes and work with people who are so excited to have the animals there and to see some beautiful scenery and be outside and to see exceptionally happy animals doing the thing they love to do, which is eat. It is a cool position. It is a cool piece of work. I don't want to downplay the hard work and the pricker bushes and the bee stings that come with it, but it is, again, intensely satisfying. And again, one of the nicest things about this to me, I'm not a salesperson. I'll encourage you to join Goats on the Go. I will try and encourage you to do goat grazing if that's something you want to do. But I don't have to feel salesy about pitching this to my customers because most of our customers are eager to have us out there. They're eager for this to be their land management solution. And this sort of visual work kind of sells itself. So that has been one of the nicest parts for me. I don't feel gross about selling services or pricing my services. Okay, so what is it like to become an affiliate? So we've kind of wrapped up what a day is like. And having done this webinar a few times, the next questions are always, okay, what do we do next, or what is it like to be an affiliate? Here we go. As an affiliate of Goats on the Go, you get training, education, and support. So we have a rough blueprint for running a grazing business that we will provide you and we can support you on. Again, like I said earlier, we don't have many hard and fast requirements. We don't dictate the number of goats you have or the number of acres you do or the number of months you work. But we have a good blueprint that we found works. And so we say, hey, get started with this rough, game plan. Figure out what you like doing. But in the meantime, we're here to help support you, make sure that you're cash flowing while you figure all that out. So the training, education, support is what a lot of people first come in for. This work takes a fair bit of equipment, especially of the fencing variety, and we offer discounts, or we've got secured discounts for our affiliates on some of that very equipment. Lead generation is another big thing. So I showed that map of the US in the beginning with all our affiliate territories shaded in. If someone Googles goat grazing near me, they're going to end up on that page. We've done that search engine work to make sure that we are one of the top hits. And so if someone in your area wants to find goats, they will find you. From that website, from that web page, they'll go into an individual profile page for their local affiliate and then contact them directly. So you are getting leads to your inbox, which is really, really cool. Mildly overwhelming sometimes when it is 3 or 4 a day in the middle of summer when you don't have enough time to sleep. But it's a great problem to have. And then the marketing and promotion is somewhat a group effort. We all use the Goats on the Go name. And so every time Goats on the Go gets in the news, even if it's, our Columbus affiliates who are just in the news right now, we've got someone doing a military base up in Wisconsin. There's Goats on the Go in, hitting the Google waves, hitting the internet waves. And so we're going to start getting more hits. We're going to start getting more outreach. So we all help market for each other just by using the same business name. And then the network is what really people stay for long term, that continued business, and the continued lead generation, but the network, the camaraderie, the people involved, the support, being able to go to the Facebook group and say, hey guys, I have a model such and such fence charger and it's not working right. Can anyone help me? we've got folks who can do that. People pop in, hey, I've got a site that's got this sort of plant on it. Will the goats eat it? When's the best time to control it? We're starting to get enough people in enough parts of the country now that we often have answers for that. And again, we're trying to start cataloging some of those things as well. What it costs. The affiliate fee is 2,900 for the first year. It's a little bit higher on that first year to cover like kind of the onboarding and initial steps to get everything set up. And then it's $2,400 a year beyond that. The three hard requirements of being a Goats on the Go affiliate: attend our training. Again, that's probably what a lot of people are signing up for anyway, so that's really not a hard requirement. You need to have a commercial liability insurance policy on the grazing business. And then this last one is kind of that's our version of quality assurance. We use Premier One brand electric netting exclusively because it is the best in the industry. And that's one of the companies our affiliates get discounts to. So it's a pretty easy requirement. Those are the hard rules, not necessarily anything about how many goats do you need, or again, how many months out of the year do you have to work. Those are the hard and fast ones. We have affiliates who have 10 goats, 20 goats, and again, 200, 500 goats. So we are happy to have you, whatever your scale is. Again, our specialty, our commonality is that 3 to 5 dozen sort of thing, but anyone is welcome. And we don't set quotas, set requirements like that. The process, first step in the process, talk to me. That's a kind of ugly link, but at least not very long, to get onto the Q&A booking site with me. I think I have it on a slide later. But also if you go to like goatsonthego.com, there's buttons for tell me about being an affiliate, and that'll lead you to the same thing. So you'll talk to me. We'll answer basic questions. You can ask me all the nitty gritty. Hey, what is it like in my area? Is there someone already here doing this? Have we had affiliates in this area? I've got this number of goats. We've been trying this. Do you think that'll work? Anything and everything you want. Then you'll finalize a territory with Aaron, the Goats on the Go founder. He's the one who helps set up all those individual shaded areas. Once you've settled on a territory, sign the contract, pay your year one dues, attend training, and you are in. Speaking of, we have an upcoming training, September 19th and 20th. It's in Ames, Iowa. This is a component, like right now, our basic training is in person. And so we're offering 2 a year at this point, 1 in the spring, 1 in the fall. So our fall training is coming up. It's a combination of hands-on work and classroom work. It is 2 half days. So that's Friday afternoon and Saturday, morning to midday. Most people are so Ames is about 35 minutes from the Des Moines airport. So most people you can fly in even like first thing Friday morning, attend training, and then fly out Saturday afternoon. We also offer a spring training in Des Moines, and so it's a little bit closer to the airport. That is 1 day, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. It's in the classroom only because in March in central Iowa, it might be 70 degrees or it might be -5. And we offer an optional conference the second day. So you don't have the hands-on there, but you have the option to do the conference. So which includes case studies from individual affiliates. We'll often try and get some like an outside speaker or two. So we've had herding dog trainers. We had extension specialists who work with livestock guardian dogs. We've had other renowned goat educators and breeders. We've had folks from the solar grazing industry. So the conference is cool to get some really extra in-depth information. And affiliates are welcome to attend any and all trainings, but as a new affiliate, you're required to attend one of the in-person ones. We're starting to offer more continuing education remotely or online, but plan on getting to Iowa at least once. And so what do you need to become an affiliate? You don't need all this stuff before you sign up, but when starting to plan purchases, budgeting, you will need goats. We do recommend at least 20 goats. Again, we do have some folks who are doing less than that, but we recommend at least 20. It is hard to do this with 5 pet Nigerian wethers. That's a slightly different model of goat grazing than we really focus on. So again, it exists. We'll welcome you if that's what you want to do, but you're going to be most of what we'll be teaching will be slightly different. We recommend experience with goats. If you've never worked with goats before, they are a beast unlike cattle or horses or sheep or any other livestock. And so we recommend having some very goat specific experience, and probably managing and owning them for at least a year. We have had folks, this is the first time they've ever had goats, they jump right into it and they've succeeded, but it's often tricky along the way. If you're not a goat person, if you're not a goat owner, you may not realize it's very hard to get veterinary help for goats. And so we do a lot of our own treating and doctoring and caring. And you may end up in a situation where you call a vet and they say, nothing I'm going to do. So we recommend having that experience with managing the animals for a bit before you jump right into grazing. You'll also need lots of fence, charters, batteries, hoses. Again, you don't need this before you sign up. Wait until you sign up and get the discounts. But plan on being able to get that. And you need to either own or have access to a truck and a trailer. And so, whether you're buying those, renting those, whatever, borrowing those, just have that plan. People always then ask me, what are the startup costs? The goat market is all over the dang place and it varies from season to season. But my general ballpark at this point in the game is if you're going to buy a goat, budget $300. You could probably find them for cheaper than that. But if you budget for $300, then you can probably find goats who are maybe they're bred already, so you're already expanding your herd, or maybe they're trained to the electric netting already and they're already used to this sort of management, which is really nice to start out with. We also have some people who lease goats. And those arrangements, there's no standard, but you're often paying per head per day. If you have the opportunity to lease goats, I think that's the easiest way to start out, because at the end of the season, they just go home. You don't have to worry about budgeting for enough hay. You don't worry about having to have a shelter for the winter or kitting them out in the spring. They just go away. I ballpark about $2,500 for the grazing specific equipment. So the fence rolls and the charters and the water tanks and hoses and things like that. The affiliate fee, which as we saw earlier is, $2,400 to $2,900, depending on what year you're in. People ask what the insurance costs. That varies so tremendously from state to state, and also depending on whether it's bundled with your farm insurance or whether it's, a standalone policy. I don't even have a good number to tell you. I hear everything from a couple hundred to a bit over $1,000. There's no good average number I can give you. And then again, trucks and trailers. I found that the market for trucks and trailers is crazy different across different parts of the country. So you're just going to have to kind of look locally and then balance that against, can you repair something, versus whether you're going to try and buy new. If you're listening to all this and you say, okay, I don't have the goats yet, I don't have that goat experience, I'm not sure this is quite right for me, I just want to learn more. We have a YouTube channel with recorded webinars from past iterations, so I recommend going and checking out some of those. There's one webinar about the goats themselves. So that's other questions I'm not even addressing here. Male or female? What type of breeds? That addresses all those questions. Our founder, Aaron, wrote a book called Goats for Good. It talks about the goat industry as a whole, in a slightly different way than most people. So it's not a manual on raising goats. It's not a manual for targeted grazing of goats. It just talks about overall trends in the industry, the challenges of working in the goat realm, and offers some really interesting ideas for folks who might have land resources but less goat resources. Hang on one second. Let me get my dog. I also recommend connecting with an affiliate, especially if you're already near some affiliates. Use our directory and go talk to them. See what their experiences have been. Again, please keep in mind, this is the very busy time of year. So if they don't respond to you right away, it's probably not because they're trying to be rude. It's because they're very, very busy. And get some goats. Get some of those animals. If you have a property, get a handful, get some electric netting, start to practice just moving them around, start to see what they will and won't eat, learn behaviors, before you're trying to move them off your property. With that, I see that there's a bunch of questions in the chat. I'm going to start there and then we'll open the floor up.